Streaming live around the world, this is Paper Cuts.
Why don't we start our own show?
With Brad Proctor.
I forgot to break up my fancy straw.
You sound insane. Do you realize that?
And Jay Maddox.
We are called Paper Cuts? Who came up with that name?
We need like some name tags with our picture on it, all laminated and whatnot. I mean, we gotta look legit, man.
We are live.
Wait. And finished. Yes.
Okay,
All
good.
right.
You just finished the book? Good timing.
I finished it. Yeah. You know, it's always good to prepare when you have the guest of the book you're reading on. You have to prepare for it. What's going on, guys? Jay Maddox here. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Paper Cuts with me over. I got to put it the right way here.
It's always backwards.
Exactly. The brains behind the operation.
No,
It's
I don't
Brad
know about
Proctor.
that. What's going on, guys?
What's up? So, tonight's guest, maybe one of the hardest working writers around today, Brad. I actually first read first time I read some of his stuff, a couple of short stories. Where are they? I have anthologies. Doorbells at Dusk. Found one of his stories in that. I got that about a year ago. Here's another one. In Darkness to Light. Another short story. Another anthology I got about a year ago. But I just finished Blackheart Boys Choir, which blew my mind.
Good one. It's a good one.
Those who go forth into the
cover,
epic face of gods.
Yeah, it's a good one too.
The Devoured. Hey, wait, let me make sure I get enough bads in this. It's a bad world.
You got it.
Devil's Night, which I'm really excited to check that one out. And guys, on top of these, he dabbles in comics, graphic novels, poetry, and he's the host of his own podcast, Weird Transmissions. Yeah, let's give it up for Curtis M. Lawson, everyone.
Thank you guys for having me.
Thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Thanks for agreeing to partake in our shenanigans. You know?
My pleasure.
Yeah, so
thank you for that kind introduction.
I do what I can, right? So we want to get into your books, we want to get into your writing, we want to get into your comics, your podcast, all that stuff. But I want to say congratulations on your little fitness journey you're doing. I've been kind of following you on Instagram, stalking you on Instagram a little bit, and seeing some of the updates, watching the transformation and everything. Looks like a lot of hard work and it's paying off. So congratulations on your little fitness journey there. It's inspiration.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, it's been good.
What was the whole mindset behind that? Did you just get up one day and say, you know what, man, I'm going to be competing with Arnold Schwarzenegger and we're going to go for it?
No, so everything in my life is motivated by existential dread, and so I'd wake up. You know, I was kind of heavy. I wasn't like super heavy, but I was overweight, and I was diagnosed with like fatty liver disease years back, and and I'd just wake up at like 2 or 3 in the morning, like every other night, and I'd be like, I'm gonna die if I don't do something. I'm like, I need to fix this. And I'll be like, oh my God, I drank 2 liters of Mountain Dew today. I'm going to fucking kill myself.
That's my kryptonite, Mountain Dew.
Yeah, man. Oh man, I love it. I try not to touch it anymore. But I, one day I was looking at my son and I was like, I want to meet my grandkids. I want to be around. I want to like be strong and healthy for my family. I need to like get my ass in gear. So I did it. And I think the big thing for me was I was reading, I don't know if it was from this book, but I was reading Bigger, Leaner, Stronger by Mike Matthews. And like that helped me a lot, but it got this mindset into my mind that like, this is like sleeping and eating. This is something that I have to do every day, before everything else. And approaching it like that made it stick for me for whatever reason. I'd never really been able. I'd eat right for like a week. I'd go to the gym for like a week.
Right. I think a lot of people get in that
the New Year's
trap.
resolution thing.
Exactly. So once I kind of changed my mindset about how, where it factored into my life, that really helped. And I've been going for like about 2 years now at it. A little bit up and down, but I've been sticking with it. It's good.
And that's the key. I know it's been told to me before that it's a marathon, not a sprint, but there are people who would do it for like 2 weeks and not see anything change and kind of
Yeah.
give up, you know?
Well, I think that's why it never stuck when I was younger. When I was younger, I was been like, it's 2 weeks. Why where's my abs? Like,
Exactly. Yeah.
But for this time, I was doing it for health, not for like vanity. So I think that's the big difference. It was this long-term thing for my health, for my family. And I wasn't just trying to look good. And I think if you're doing it for vanity's sake, if you see immediate results, that could be a motivator. But like, if not, it's really easy to get discouraged if it's like, oh, I've been at this for 2 months and I don't look any better. Like,
and I think a lot of people start out with it being for vanity. And sometimes it takes that wake up call to really kick in the health part of it. So yeah, not to turn this into like a fitness story or nothing, but yeah.
Did you have any issues with it all during COVID being locked down? Did that affect you at all, or you still be okay with it?
I mean, it affected me, like not fitness wise. I mean, with the gym wasn't open, I just worked out at home, and I have weights and stuff, So, COVID was weird for me though, because my wife was working from home, and up until then, for the past couple of years before COVID, we kind of switched. I used to work like 60 hours a week, and she stayed home with our son and stuff, and he's in like a virtual school and such. So, she had the opportunity for a job that was pretty good, and so we flip-flopped, and I stayed home and wrote and took care of our son. She went back to work, and probably like 2 or 3 years like that where I was only working about 12 hours a week at a day job, and the rest of it was really focused on writing and taking care of my kid. But COVID kind of reversed that again, because she was working from home and my job needed help because they were like they were seen as an essential service, and nobody wanted to work. So I had the opportunity to pick up a lot of hours. So financially it was fantastic, but it kind of got in the way of writing,
Yeah. So did your writing take a big hit during and stuff?
I still got stuff accomplished, but not to the rate I was doing before. Pre-COVID, for the couple of years before that, I was writing for like 3 hours a day, Monday through Friday, which because I figured if I had the opportunity to write that much and I wasn't taking advantage of it, I was a jerk, because there's so many people who would kill for that,
Yeah.
So if I did anything, if I played a video game or anything, I was racked with guilt, But I'm still producing stuff, but not nearly at the rate that I was. But our situation is probably going back to normal next month, and I'm gonna be diving hard back into writing.
Did you write any sort of COVID stories?
No, I figured there was going to be a lot of that.
Yeah,
I always ask people that, because I'm waiting for someone to say yes. Just wait for it. It's coming out in 2 years when we're still doing this. So
yeah, right. No, I figured nobody wants to read about what they're living through.
Exactly. Yeah, I feel like there's gonna be a bunch of them come out, and then no one wants to read them right now.
I know.
Yeah. Exactly.
Like, read them now or forget about them later. So I was checking out your website earlier today. You have a lot of stuff going on your website. You have your like Twitter attached to it. You have a blog to it. So, I mean, it looks like social media is somewhat of a big part of you as far as your life goes, as far as promoting your work. How do you feel about having to use social media to, promote your work right now?
For the most part, I like it. I go through these things where I'm like, I'm deleting my Twitter account. I'm getting but I think that it's just a matter of how you approach it and not letting it control you. You have to use it in a way that benefits you and that works with your sanity. And I've stopped following a lot of people. I've muted a lot of, especially on Twitter, because you can mute specific keywords on Twitter. Yeah. So anything that's gonna
that's probably healthy too, by the way.
Yeah. I'm just trying not to get all the stuff that's going to upset me. And then I also, whenever I post something, because I'm mainly there to socially connect with creative people and horror lovers and to promote my work. So nowadays, I always say, is this going to be beneficial for me to post? Is this going to help my career or be, beneficial for someone to read? And if it's just going to piss people off because I want to vent, then I don't post it. I'll type it out and then I'll delete it.
Wow. Type it out, screenshot it, you save it for later.
Exactly. Which I didn't always do. I used to post that stuff.
Yeah, Twitter's like a double-edged sword. Like, it can be great, and then it just a cesspit on the other side of it.
Yeah,
so it really depends on. Do you ever feel awkward like promoting your own stuff? Because we talk to other authors who are like, I don't like to talk about myself. It feels weird, awkward. Do you have any of that, or
No.
you okay with it? Yeah, just throw it out there.
No, I like talking about myself. I like hearing my own voice.
That's why you have a podcast.
That's why I have a podcast.
There you go. Yeah.
I'm an attention hog. I used to play in bands. I like people, paying attention to me. So, and like I said, I don't know. I'm a big believer in like DIY kind of entrepreneurism. That's not a real word. I think I butchered that, but you know what I mean. And I think when people are out, if they're promoting their work in a reasonable way, I think it's great.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. It's when people are kind of obnoxious about it that it becomes a problem, and hopefully I'm not obnoxious about it. But when people are DMing everybody on their Twitter like my book's out, or my Kickstarter's up.
There's definitely a right way and a wrong way to do it. Yeah.
I mean, I haven't seen you cram it down anybody's throat yet.
I try not to.
That happens sometimes. That's when you kind of get turned away from it. So, and then like me and Brad will talk about, all of a sudden we'll get a DM, hey, read my book and review it.
Yeah.
Is there like a please in there somewhere, or
like someone you've never even heard of before?
Yeah. Like, hi, do I know you?
It's different if you have that prior relationship with an author or a publisher or something,
right,
and then they ask you, but just some random person out of the blue is like, okay.
Yeah, exactly. And I've seen people. I actually saw like Cameron Cheney posted a screenshot of someone complaining about him not reading the books that he got sent or something like that.
I think I saw that too.
Yeah.
And it kills me because like if I can send somebody a book, whether it's a physical book or an ebook or whatever, if they're willing to maybe take a look at it, I'm thankful for that. And I never expected them to get to it. Like they're going to read what they want to read, what they feel excited to or drawn to. And they're on, even if, it doesn't matter if I send them, like a $200 book or something like that. They have no, there's no, I guess, commitment I'm expecting for them to read it. It's just, I'm happy that they agreed to a maybe. And you can't hassle people either. If they get to it, they get to it. And there's so many books out there. There's so much content.
Not enough time.
Yeah. So
exactly.
Anybody who actually does take the time to read my stuff, I'm very thankful and, humbled by the fact that with all these entertainment options that they'd spend, however many hours with me. But I never, ever expect it.
Yeah. That's like that existential dread you were talking about. Like there's so many books and I'm never going to get to them all.
Yes.
That's like I think a common thing with reviewers and stuff. Like, I've got all these books and I will never get to them all before I die. Just it's a horrible feeling.
My TBR is a lifetime.
It's a lifetime TBR.
Yeah. So speaking of your books, explain to us what you mean about being unapologetically weird. I worked all day trying to rehearse that word, still probably butchered it.
Unapologetically weird. Yeah, I just wanted something kind of, I don't know, that sounded kind of clever on there. And I didn't really know how to, I guess, how to phrase my stuff, especially the books like Bad World and Those Who Go Forth into the Empty Place of Gods. They don't necessarily fall into the realm of like weird fiction per se, but they're weird books. And that just kind of, I felt like it summed up what I do, especially in those books that are a little bit cross genre. I just write weird shit. I don't know. And I think that some people, I guess the unapologetic part is really, there's some people, especially when you're getting into some like philosophical ideas, which I try to do. If you try to do anything kind of deep, there's almost this genre guilt that comes with some authors. And it's like, oh, it's not horror when I do it. It's not fantasy when I do it. And I just really embrace that sort of thing, especially like I draw from comics, I draw from TV, I draw from literature, I draw from history and philosophy. And I'm not ashamed of any of my influences, whether it's X-Men or Plato,
And that's a big range too, from X-Men to Plato. All things from too. It's pretty cool.
I mean, when I first saw that, I just figured he doesn't give a shit if we like it or not. He's doing what he wants to do.
Well, that's it too. That's a big thing. If people ask me sometimes, other authors about, how you should decide what books to write. And
Right.
I was on some podcast a couple of years ago, and he's like, "Oh, what kind of market research do you do before you decide to write a book?" And I'm like, "Market research."
I didn't know you did that.
Get your Twitter polls out, what people want to read and stuff.
Well, there's actually this software. I have it for Amazon ads because you can use it for picking out keywords when you run Amazon ads. But it's really meant to you type in like a subgenre or whatever, like like nurse romances or something like that, and it tells you how many dollars a month of that like keyword is sold on Amazon.
Well, that's
and how many books that are sold, and you can dig real deep down. And some people use the software to decide what books they're going to write because they're trying to write to market and they're trying to write for money.
Right,
But I always tell people the chances of making any money in this game are so slim. It's really hard to make a living, almost impossible to make a living. But like even making like decent side money is really hard, and like you're probably not going to do it without like years and years of work at least. So at least write something that you love, because even if nobody reads it, you'll have that. And if you compromise and you write something just because you think it's going to sell, and nobody buys it anyway, then you have nothing.
That's got to be just a big hit to your ego too. Like if you're writing for a certain demographic and then no one checks it out, that's probably going to make you not want to write anything ever again.
Exactly. So I'd rather have a book that I love that, maybe two other people like than try to write something that's going to be a big hit and I hate it. My wife, I think, hates that about me.
But with your wife, do you let her read your stuff like before you put it out there? Does she read it for you? Or?
She used to. My wife's like a grammar Nazi, so she's really good at copy editing. She hasn't really done it for me in the last couple of years since she went back to work, and she doesn't like a lot of my stuff. It's just not her kind of thing. Like boys choir, she got like 2 pages in the boys choir. She's like, I hate this guy. I can't read this.
Yeah, I got a very American Psycho meets A Clockwork Orange combination in that book for some reason. Just those two together.
Those were big influences. When I was writing it, I kind of when I was trying to figure out how I wanted to tell the story, I actually reverse engineered A Clockwork Orange, American Psycho, Fight Club, all these books that had these. I was trying to create like a protagonist who was a villain and was unlikable, but still had a level of charm to him.
Right.
So that's what I was thinking, Alex DeLars, Patrick Bateman, Tyler Durden. So there's definitely a big influence of those books on Boys Choir.
Yeah, Lucian's definitely a character like at some points you just hate his guts, and then other points you feel sorry and sympathetic for him because of what he's gone through.
Because
but then he doesn't
a layer character like that.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And I was trying to figure out what about writing somebody that, that's that bad, really, how you kind of tug at people, how you make them feel sympathetic. And I did a lot of studying on how people did that in other books and such. So
your wife didn't like that one, huh?
No, she didn't like that one. No, she.
So I do want to talk about Blackheart Boys Choir. That's such a weird combination because I don't think I've ever read anything horror-wise that involves classical music. There's like heavy metal stuff like Heart-Shaped Box and Final Reconciliation stuff. Nothing I can think of that involves classical music. What was your inspiration to pull classical music into it?
Well, I mean, I like classical music, and the main reason why I did classical music in it, because I initially was thinking about metal because I come from a metal background. I grew up as like a black metal kid, and I played in black metal bands and punk bands and stuff. But while I was researching Clockwork Orange, one of the reasons why it was written with all the strange slang is because Anthony Burgess said, in 10 years, if people are still reading this book, and Alex is like, me and my groovy droogs, like if he's using all this like 1960s slang, it's going to feel dated. It's just not going to jive anymore. People are going to think it's goofy. So he made up this kind of slang and this fake counterculture so that it would be timeless. And I figured if I made these kids like black metal kids or something like that, like metal's already old man music at this point, like no young people listen to it. So I figured it's just going to feel dated. It's going to get lost in the dustbin fairly quickly if I did that. So I said, what's timeless? Classical music's timeless. And then I started thinking about, in black metal in particular, the black metal culture has this sense of kind of inflated artificial elitism and like artificial bravado, and everybody's got to be like unholier than thou, and it's like I'm more cult than this guy, and blah, blah, blah. And you have to look a certain way, you have to act a certain way, and like like the look is very important. So I wanted to take these metal is old man music, man, that hurts. Yeah, it does, you're telling me. So I wanted to take those elements and put them into kind of an artificial, or I guess a made up subculture. So I said, let's make classical music into a subculture, kind of a counterculture. And that was the real inspiration for it. But also there are a few horror stories that I really love that incorporate classical music. The music of Eric Zahn is an example by H.P. Lovecraft. And for some reason, I don't think there's any real musical references in any of the King in Yellow stories, but people like to incorporate the King in Yellow in music for some reason too, a lot.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was the real reason for the classical music though. And I thought it ended up working well with creating the aesthetic for Lucian with the suits, and it felt like it meshed together very organically. And I was able to have probably the most rewarding part of writing that, but not the most, but one of the most was the deep dive into classical music, because I'd been kind of a casual fan.
It was like a little history lesson for me at times.
Yeah. So I'd been a casual fan before that, but I went real deep and found all these composers I had never heard and all this history I had never heard. And these guys were crazier than like any modern rock stars, the stuff they did.
Yeah.
And I discovered all this wonderful music. It was really fantastic. And then luckily, when S.T. Joshi, actually, he did the copy edits aside from the introduction, and he writes choral music, and he's in a choir, and he's very into classical music. So he was able to kind of look for any flaws I had in the classical music stuff. And he didn't find any, which was very cool.
Expert do it.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it was very rewarding, that aspect of the book.
It was cool. It was refreshing because like I said, I'd never read anything like that, and it was very refreshing to read something different than incorporating some other kind of music that other people have done before. It was cool.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I'll have to ask.
Go ahead.
I'm going to interrupt you. The unicorn and the name of it, is that something that's real from folklore or mythology, or did you make all that up?
No, it's from like Goetic tradition, which is kind of like the lesser key of Solomon. Basically, they're demons that can be summoned in kind of ancient Jewish tradition. It goes back to like King Solomon and all this sort of stuff. And there's this book of all these demons and their names and what they do. And Amdusius in that tradition is the conductor of hell. So he's like this musical demon. And
say the name one more time.
Amdusius.
Okay, because we were just talking off air too. We were like, Amdusia. I was close.
Don't know how to say it.
Yeah,
I might be saying it wrong. I just read it, so I just copied it. But yeah, so that comes from actual Goetic tradition, and I tried to be very thorough in my research with that too, as far as the number 67 shows up a lot in the book. He's the 67th Duke of Hell and blah blah blah. So I tried to incorporate a lot of that stuff, and then there were subtle things that go with the demonology of that, I guess, that I tried to incorporate that people won't notice. But I kind of did it for me. Even with the musical elements with that book, I did things which probably no one will ever notice, but there's like a meter in such to the chapters. It's at one point, it's the one chapter will be about with Lucian with the counselor, and then the next will be about some adult failing him, and then the next will be him falling deeper into this thing and such. It was supposed to be this kind of waltz timing, this 1 2 3 1 2 3, and stuff that no one was ever going to pick up on.
That's a
And-
lot of
Good job
depth
with
to
that,
go into
because
it,
we did
though.
pick up.
yeah, and then there's a lot of repeated phrases. I would like lift whole like sentences or a couple sentences and repeat them throughout the book to be kind of the way you repeat phrases in music and things like that. So
That's cool. You went into that level of detail with it.
yeah, I got
You know,
obsessed with
for something that people may not even notice, like you said. So that's cool.
yeah.
Dedication.
It was obsession. I was so like I fell into that book so hard when I wrote it. I felt like Lucian with the piece
Yeah.
of music. It was just like my life for like a year. So
You mentioned Lovecraft earlier, and you mentioned King Yellow, Chambers. Are those influences you have? Have you ever always leaned towards the weird side of the cosmic side? Or
yeah, well, definitely supernatural horror in general. I was always when I was a kid, I was a Freddy Krueger guy. I liked the dream demon aspect, and I've always liked supernatural horror. And then I kind of fell through into Lovecraft through a back door. I fell into Lovecraft through this band Morbid Angel, and I had actually read something called the Simon Necronomicon, which is like this fraudulent occult book. It's supposed to be the real Necronomicon, but it was made by some guy in New York in like the 70s. And that's kind of how I fell into Lovecraft. And when I first read Lovecraft, it was, I don't know, I was a teenager and it was a little bit too wordy for me. I liked the concept, but I couldn't really get into it. And then I went back a few years later and I just fell in love. So Lovecraft's been a big influence on me for a long time, and the King in Yellow, I think, is one of the most fascinating mythoses out there. And actually, I have this right here. I recently had a story in Under Twin Suns, which is a King in Yellow anthology, and it was so incredibly cool to be able to write a King in Yellow story for that.
Yeah.
When I got the invite to it, I like instantly said yes, and and my story is right next to, I believe it's right before Joe Pulver's posthumous story there, and Joseph Pulver was like the King in Yellow guy, like in the modern era. So it was very cool to be right next to him in that book. A big honor. And yeah, I think the whole idea of Carcosa and all that is very intriguing. And obviously it got kind of a big push because of True Detective and such. So it's cool that it's,
I was gonna say it pops up without you realizing it. True Detective. Joanna Koch had Wingspan or Severed Hands. I don't know if you checked that out, but that was all King in Yellow and related to all of that stuff. I know a lot of people look at Chambers and look at Lovecraft as influences, and then there are people who like the work from the people who are influenced by them better. So it's like different levels.
Yeah, different level. I don't like a lot of Lovecraft pastiche. I like some of it. I'm not going to say that I don't like any of it, but I'm very particular about it. And I think that there's room for all of it. I think there's room for the silly shit that where people just want to play with the myths and the monsters and do whatever. But to me, what I really love about Lovecraft is that sense of like cosmic dread and nihilism, and like oh crap, we live in an uncaring, maybe antagonistic universe. And the same with like Chambers, this sense of something out there that's so beyond us. That's what really draws me to cosmic horror and to those guys. So I'm not really as into stuff where it's just like, let's put tentacles on something. The window dressing's cool, but that's not really my thing.
Yeah. So you kind of do that in not the tentacles, but the things out there. Those who go forth into the empty place of gods is. Yeah, this is like an action movie mixed with cosmic horror that I really dug. How did you get hooked up with Doug Rinaldi and co-write this?
So Doug Rinaldi and I first met in like the year 2000 or 2001 at something called the More Force Fest, which was a metal show in a school gymnasium. And my band was playing our first show, and his band was playing. It was called Bane of Existence. He was in, and they were kind of a big death metal band around here at the time. And we played a bunch of shows together, and then we just, drifted apart. We both kind of got out of playing in bands, and we hadn't talked to each other in years. And then on Facebook, there's a group called New England Horror Writers. And I posted a picture of me like on stage back in my metal days or whatever in there. And he's like, whoa, are you that Curtis? And I was like, yeah. And then we realized who each other
Curtis?
were. Yeah. And
your reputation was there with you. So
yeah, exactly. So we started talking again, and he posted something on Facebook saying that he had a couple story ideas that he didn't know where to go with, and he was looking for a co-writer. So I messaged him, and he pitched a couple ideas at me, and one was for this this game show guy who unintentionally spills the beans on some big cosmic secret, and I was like, that sounds fantastic. So that's how we ended up doing that together, and it was a really fun collaborative process. I kind of worked on fleshing out where Doug got stuck and pitched some ideas at him. He kind of tweaked them and pitched them back at me, and then I wrote up a suggested scene list. I just broke it down. I plan everything out anyways. I'm really nerdy about it. I have like color-coded index cards and shit, with different character arcs and stuff. So I broke it down into scenes, and I said, well, what do you think about this for the scenes? And then we just picked out which scenes we wanted to write. And then then once we wrote them, we kind of smoothed out the rough edges. And I think it came out pretty good. But it's
pretty wild.
It's probably my most divisive book that I've put out. Has more 1 stars than anything I've ever done, but it's I think it's because people aren't. I guess the biggest complaint I get about my work is unlikable characters between those who go forth in Boys Choir.
Yeah,
because it's hard to like Brewster Gilligan, it's hard to like Lucien Beaumont. So if you need a character that you really need to like, I might not be the guy for you. But well,
I'm going to read it now just for that. I have the ebook, so I'm gonna check it out just for
if
that.
You like House, if you like Gregory House, I might be your type of horror writer.
There you go.
But and the other thing about it, I think some people weren't expecting the comedy of it.
It is kind of funny at times, yeah.
Yeah. So if you're expecting like a more like full on serious cosmic horror book, it's gonna kind of throw you a little bit. But
how do you feel about those 1-star reviews?
Oh, it's fine. I mean, I most of them are just 1-star ratings, and it's fine. Like, they don't like it. I can guess why they don't like it, and that's fine. There was one that though that was really mean, and it said, it had like the plotting of 13-year-old Thelemites trying to write a video game or something like that, and it was like all boss battles, but didn't even show all the boss battles or something like that,
yeah.
Which is fine. Like I said, it's not a book for everyone, and I never get upset about 1-star reviews as long as the person really felt that way. If it was somebody who just didn't like me and was leaving it to screw with me, I'd be pissed off. But what I write isn't for everybody, and that's totally fine. Nobody writes something for everyone. So
right.
Is this the only collaboration that you've written with anybody?
Yes, that's the only collaboration I've written with anyone to this point. Doug and I are supposed to do something else at some point when my schedule clears up a little bit. And other than that, I wrote one story for a shared world book, but I can't really talk about that yet. But hopefully that'll come out next year. Yeah. And
well, who do you want to write with? Because they might be listening. Go ahead.
Oh man, well, I actually. I just approached Jeffrey Thomas and asked him, but he's got too big of a schedule right now. So I mean, there's a lot of people I'd love to write with. I'm pretty open, but like I said, Jeffrey Thomas is there. I don't know if John Langan ever collaborates with anybody. I'd love to write a book with John. I'm pretty much open. Anybody who writes kind of weird stuff, and I think I'd mesh with. I'd be happy to work on something with if I had the time.
So if you were to like approach another writer, would you approach them with like the idea for it, or you say, hey, let's write a book together and come up with it together?
I guess it depends on the person and what was going on. Like when I approached Jeffrey the other day, I had kind of an idea of what I wanted to do. And I said, hey, you did a book that had this kind of format, and I kind of like to do that. And I had more of an idea in my head, but I wanted to test the waters before throwing everything at him all at once.
Oh yeah.
So I guess, if I was going to approach someone, I'd probably have it a little bit more fleshed out, just because I like to have all my ducks in a row, because I don't
Right.
want to waste somebody's time and be like, hey, want to do something? Yeah. What do you want to do? I don't know.
So
Yeah,
it sounds like you're
ideal?
definitely.
Go for it. Yeah.
So sounds like you're a plotter, not a pantser. Then you
Oh,
all
I'm
your
very
note
much.
cards and all that stuff.
Yeah, I'm very much a plotter. Even with short stories, I'll sit down. I'm like, no, I won't go crazy, but I try to, write down the just the basic bullet points of the story and get myself from point A to Z. Because if I don't, I when I first started writing, man, I didn't do that, and I just write these like weird slice of life vignettes that went nowhere. It was just like people monologuing in like description, like really intricate descriptions of the background.
So when you are plotting your book out, do you ever start at the end, like, oh, this will be an awesome ending, and then work your way backwards, or do you always kind of start with the beginning or a character idea, or?
It depends on the book. I mean, with Boys Choir, that all started from the name. I at one point wanted to start a band called Blackheart Boys Choir, but I figured I was too old to be in any band that's had boys in the name. But the name stuck with me forever. And I'm like, I'm just going to write a book called Blackheart Boys Choir. And then I got the idea of doing it about, like mass violence. And obviously Blackheart Boys Choir starts at the end. So, that was kind of started with the end in mind. And it all depends on the project. Sometimes it's a philosophical idea I want to explore. Sometimes it's a character. Like Bad World, man. Bad World was the second book I wrote. I didn't know how to write books yet, really. I had written one novel before that, and I kind of copied that formula from someone else, not the content, but I was like, oh, this guy did these alternating chapters and blah, blah, blah. So I used that as kind of a roadmap, which is why I think I was able to write a book in the first place. And then with Bad World, I was like, oh, nobody's going to ever read this. Nobody's going to care about this ridiculous story. So I just wrote down a bunch of scenes that I thought would be cool. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to have a nun fight a mercenary at a church. And I'm going to do so I just wrote all these scenes down on cards. And then I wrote it all out of order. I wrote the stuff that I thought would be the most fun to write. And then I kind of just sewed it all together into a story. So yeah, the process works different depending on the project.
So what should somebody start with to get a good idea of your style for your collection?
I feel like I have two different kind of styles that are a little bit stark. If you wanted to get a taste of both, Those Who Go Forth is a good place, because it kind of merges that cosmic, grim, kind of existential dread thing that I do.
Right.
But it also has the comedy aspect in the kind of absurdist aspect. So that's kind of a mix. But if you want one or the other, it's a bad world is a
four bads, right? The
four bads, yeah. It's taken from the it's a mad world,
right?
Which is the old.
I picked up on that, but
yeah. So if you want something that's just totally absurdist and action packed and full of violence and fun and stupid jokes, then that's the way to go. If you want something more comic booky, I guess that really embraces my love of comics and pulp film and stuff like that. If you want something grim and serious and such like that, then Boys Choir, I think, is the way to go. I think Boys Choir is the best thing I've written, but it's also the most personal book I've ever written, so it's hard to say. Some people, like Devil's Night, did very well for me. A lot of people love Devil's Night. People said it's the best thing I've ever written. And that's also in kind of the more grim, serious sort of way. There's not a lot of comedy or anything in there. It's not quite as cosmic as the other stuff, but it's still supernatural horror for the most part.
I mean, there's so much of your stuff out there. Do you keep track of everything that you have released? Do you even know how many items you have released right now?
I mean, if I sat down and think about it, I can,
How many work in progresses do you have right now?
So I have a lot of to be written. Instead of a TBR, I have a TBW. But I try to keep to one project at a time for the most part, because otherwise I never finish anything. So right now I really have I have too much going on right now, to be honest. On Patreon, I have a serial going on called Couch Surfing Through the 12 Chambers of Hell. Nice. And that's a kind of it's about an aging rock star who's lost his family, and he goes on this kind of road trip to find a reason not to kill himself, and goes on a road trip down Route 50, the loneliest road in America. But it's kind of this weird magical surrealism thing where, there's all these parallels to Egyptian mythology so there's stuff that, like gods and like things from Egyptian mythology showing up, and he doesn't really bat an eye at it. It's just kind of natural within the story world. So it has a weird kind of surrealist aspect to it, and it's really about like grief and such like that. And I'm doing that on Patreon right now. There'll be 12 chapters, and it's supposed to mimic the Pharaoh's journey through the afterlife, the 12 chambers of hell.
That's cool.
Yeah, I'm pretty happy with it so far. And that one is weird though, because I'm writing it. That one I did not plan out. Like I kind of planned it out as far as, you know, the Pharaoh's journey, and so I have like what each chapter is supposed to represent, but I'm writing it month to month, which is kind of different for me. And then doing a new novel for Weird House Press, which I have a very good relationship with Weird House Press. They're fantastic to work with. Joe Morey is just...
The books are gorgeous too.
Oh, so Joe, I don't know if you know this. Joe Morey was the founder of Dark Regions Press way back in the day, and his son runs it now. So Joe has Weird House Press now, and he's been doing this since the 80s or something like that, and he just knows how to put together a fabulous book, and he has such a wealth of knowledge about the genre and about the business. So he's fantastic to work with, and he's just a really nice guy. So I'm doing a new novel for them, which is going to be a Lovecraftian thing within the Lovecraftian mythos, which kind of Joe wanted something within that. And I haven't done much within the actual mythos because I have such a respect for Lovecraft that I was afraid of shitting on what he did, messing it up. But I'm going to give it a try. I think I have a pretty cool idea for it. And it's going to be kind of Lovecraft meets Silent Hill kind of thing. We'll see.
Oh,
see if
cool.
I pull it off. And
creepy.
Yeah. And then putting together a collection, which will be a lot of reprints and a lot of the stuff I've put on Patreon, but also some new short fiction that I'm working with another publisher tentatively. I have a kind of a verbal agreement with them at this point. And both of those are probably going to come out next year, probably late next year. And then there's that shared universe thing I told you about, which is finished, but that's going to be coming out next year. So a lot of stuff like that. And I have a new short story coming out in Penumbra #2, maybe like this month or next month. I'm not sure when it's going to drop, which is a journal that S.T. Joshi edits for Hippocampus Press.
Okay.
So that's what I have going on at the moment.
Got a lot going on. It's what you're saying.
I know. Brad, I want to get into some of his podcast stuff. So you want to do a game first and get that in there, kind of break things up for us? So
we're going to play a lightning round with everybody. And this is what we spent our budget on.
I can get the timer. Yeah. Let me get the timer.
We'll do 60 seconds.
I always forget about this.
So that's what all our budget goes to, Curtis. Is
that graphic?
5-second graphics.
Are we doing 60 seconds or?
Yeah, we'll do 60 seconds. Okay. So I've got 20 questions, I think. Yeah, 20 questions. We'll see how many you can get done in 60 seconds.
All right. Are we ready? Are you
ready? You tell me when you're ready.
Let's do this and go.
Who or what is your favorite cosmic entity?
Shub-Niggurath.
Who is your favorite classical composer?
Beethoven or Tchaikovsky.
Do you believe in ghosts?
No. I wish
I could. If you could meet any author, alive or dead, who would it be?
Probably Lovecraft.
What's your favorite holiday?
Halloween or Christmas.
Your desert island book.
Oh, it'd have to be something huge. Can I get an omnibus of the Dark Tower?
There you go. What's your favorite food?
Unfortunately, pizza.
Your dream vacation spot?
Costa Rica. I'd love a surf trip to Costa Rica.
10 seconds.
If you could have one superpower, what would it be?
Invisibility.
What's your favorite band?
Guns N' Roses.
And we're done.
We'll throw in one more to finish it off. Who would win in a fight, Cthulhu or Hastur, a.k.a. the King in Yellow?
I think Cthulhu would eat him, I think.
Just eat him?
Yeah.
All right,
I wouldn't keep track of how many he did. Did you?
I skipped around, so I don't know. Okay. We got like 10 or so.
That's our unorganized game to break things up.
All right. So I panic. I'm like, is it Guns N' Roses or it's Sam Hain or is it Danzig? We're gonna go with Guns N' Roses.
Who could it be?
Depends on what day of the week it is.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Have a favorite band for every day of the week.
Yep.
So let's. I'm really curious about your podcast, Weird Transmissions. Am I saying that right?
That's how I say it. I don't know if I'm saying it right.
I mean, you
It's
spell weird with
W-Y-R-D.
W-Y-R-D.
I've heard people pronounce it word, but I meant it to be pronounced weird.
That's
you
how I
meant
said
weird.
it.
You meant weird to be pronounced weird. Okay.
Yes.
Nice. Okay. I like that play there. So describe what's going on with this podcast here. What is this all about?
Well, it started kind of as an extension of these live readings I was doing here in Salem. There's this place called Kodo, which is a sushi and underground music venue in Salem.
Because that goes together.
Yeah, it's actually like a sign with a pentagram on it. It says Salem and it says sushi and underground music. You know, like that's the sign. So I just called them one day and asked them if I could do readings there, and they said yes. So I started putting on author readings, and then that kind of got pushed aside because of COVID. And Willem Pugmire had just died, and I had never had any sort of contact with him, but I had just read the book he did with Jeffrey Thomas, the Encounters with Enoch Coffin, and I fell in love with it. I fell in love with Willem's writing, and I was like, man, I'm never going to get to talk to this guy because he just died, and like I never reached out to him or anything. I started thinking about how many awesome people there are that are contemporaries of me that live around. I said I should try to talk to some people, so I'm going to start a podcast. And, you know, I got to talk to Ramsey Campbell. I got to talk to John Langan. It's not live yet, but I talked to Laird Barron a couple weeks ago. Ari Vaughn from Danzig, because I don't just do authors. I do musicians and artists and anybody I find interesting pretty much. But I just did it as a social thing because I have a friend who, you know, we'll meet up maybe once a month and we'll just walk around or drive around for hours and we'll just have these conversations. I realize that that's something that one of the things I value most is having conversations about art and music and philosophy and stuff like that. So I decided to make that a bigger part of my life and talk to more people about it. So that's what I decided to do.
How long have you been doing it?
Yeah. I think there's 65 episodes right now.
Okay.
I try to do one a week. Sometimes I don't get it. I've skipped a few weeks here and there, but yeah, so roughly 65 weeks.
You carry around like a tape recorder or do it all over the phone line? Or me and Brad just want to know so when we get invited onto it, what to expect. That's all. But
I usually use StreamYard, which is what you guys use. And but sometimes that doesn't work for whatever reason. I've used Skype before with Ari Vaughn from Danzig. You know, he's very kind of not a tech guy. So I got an app from my phone that let me record the phone call, and I just talked to him on the phone for 3 hours.
Wow. Funny somebody in a band, not a tech guy this day and age when they do so much editing on computers and stuff.
Oh, he hasn't really I mean, he still plays music, but he left Danzig in like the 90s. So.
Right.
So that's
you have like a set schedule that do you just try to do it when you feel like you could do it? I
try to put up an episode every Tuesday, but I record usually on Thursdays or Fridays, but I always have a back of it. I usually have like a month worth ready to go. Okay. And I try to work it around the guests as best as I can. So sometimes I might do I might record 3 in a week, or I might not record any that week. It really depends on what the people can do. And also I do panel kind of things on there too, occasionally. Like I did one on musical horror. And I had Douglas Wynn and James Chambers and Todd Kiesling on there. And, setting up, coordinating something like that with multiple people is kind of tough.
Right.
And I just did one, it's not live yet, but I did one where we discussed pornography as art. And I had Danny Brown, who calls herself the Queen of Filth, who writes kind of like weird, erotic, absurdist stuff, was on there, and she's in England. And then I had Samantha Mack, who's an adult film star, and she was out in California. So, there's like this huge time difference. So I'm on the East Coast. So, I just do it whenever I can coordinate it with the people. When I did Ramsey Campbell, once again, he's in the UK, so he's later than we are. So I did that in the afternoon.
Right. Is there like an ultimate interviewee that you're trying to get, or anyone to
Glenn Danzig, hands down. There's this joke that Danzig comes up like every episode. I'm like obsessed with everything Danzig's done musically, pretty much. and I'm
I don't
trying
think he does.
to.
I don't think he does very many interviews to begin with. So.
He doesn't.
Yeah.
He hates people, and
Exactly.
and I've been trying so hard. I've talked to the guy who runs Seventh House, which is kind of like his unofficial fan club, and I've reached out to other people he's been in bands with, but it's not going to happen. He's never going to do it. But that would be the one.
That's your big fish.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I actually even found his agent on IMDb and reached out to his agent. So.
Really?
Did you get a response back?
Send random emails to whoever.
Like,
hey, you may be his mailman. Can you send him a letter for me?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So before we get into your readings, last thing about the podcast here, unless Brad has something. Which podcast do you listen to the most? And any answer besides Paper Cuts gets you banned.
It's the wrong answer. Yeah.
Well, Paper Cuts is definitely the number one.
No.
He's
do you
like,
ever check out? Do you ever check
again?
out other? Yeah. Do you ever check out other podcasts? Like, what are they doing? Maybe I
Yeah,
can just switch it up every now and then. See.
I listen to This Is Horror. They have a lot of good guests on This Is Horror. I listen to the Lovecraft Easing podcast, and then that's probably it for like horror podcasts that I listen to regularly. I listen to the self-publishing podcast. There's a lot of good business information on that, and then there's some financial podcast I listen to, which is about kind of I guess ethical ways to build wealth and such like that. And I also listen to some more philosophical stuff, like in political stuff, which I don't really want to name here because I'm going to piss someone off if I do. So
Yeah.
Oh, we just ruined it. No, go.
Yeah.
Whole show's over.
Yeah.
Do you wanna go ahead and do your reading?
Yeah, sure.
From Devil's Night.
Yeah. So this one is called Fire Sermon. I should have bookmarked it because it has this fancy book ribbon right built into the book. Did I use it? No, I didn't. So this one's called Fire Sermon, and it's kind of a shorter one, but I've read this live at those weird horror readings in Salem I mentioned. So people seem to like it, and it's got this cool illustration right here.
Yeah, the art. What's the artist's name?
Luke Spooner.
Luke Spooner.
He also goes by Carrion House.
So Devil's Night's available now, or
actually, the hardcover is still available. I think there might be like 50 copies left at Weird House, and you can only get the hardcover directly from them. But the ebook went live today.
Okay,
so it's finally available in ebook. We're trying to get the trade paperback up as well, but ebook's $4.99 on Kindle right now. So, all right, Fire Sermon. Brothers and sisters, we are gathered here tonight to join in solidarity against the encroaching darkness. We come together to take a stand, to reject the crime, the pain, and the sin of this world and its prince. We come together as one to embrace the light. Beyond these hallowed walls, a city is burning. Greedy, weak-willed men scramble about for Satan's shallow offerings. They fight, steal, and destroy for scraps of cash, for reputation and respect, or for simple carnal pleasure. They light fires, desperate for a warmth that they shall never know, because they choose to dwell outside of God's light. But let's talk about fire for a moment, shall we? Fire is a tool born of the Lord. Its force of purification, from Michael's flaming sword to the ovens that kill bacteria in our food. God hath rained it upon his enemies in biblical times, and Mother Church used it to purge wickedness and sin not so long ago. Before the lies of the modern age, before the rationalist charlatans tried to erase the miraculous, we knew that a barrier of holy fire lay between the worlds we could see and heaven itself. So, if fire is a holy thing, why would God Almighty allow the wicked to misuse it? Why, in all his wisdom, would he allow these savages to use a sacred force to kill and destroy? Why would he let destitute men and women get trapped in burning buildings and allow firefighters to perish, choked by toxic smoke or roasted by heat? Well, the first thing you must remember, and remember this well, is that God makes no mistakes. In his infinite grace, the Lord gave us free will, just as he gave us fire. And why would he bestow such dangerous gifts? Because they are the keys that open the door between this hell we call earth, this imperfect creation of the demiurge, ruled by the serpent of Eden, and heaven itself. But these keys, brothers and sisters, they must be used in conjunction. I spoke of the holy inferno that separates this world and all the others in the night sky from the invisible and perfect. It is a pure flame, born of God's incredible love, and no wicked thing can pass through it. Only those armored in faith can hope to walk through the burning gates of the welkin and become one with the infinite. To wear the armor of faith, now that is a choice. And that is what I mean when I say the keys to heaven, fire and will, must be used in conjunction. That is why the vengeful and godless are burning to death across Detroit tonight, and why that death shall lead to oblivion, because they are not armored in faith. They play with holy fire as if it were a toy, or they have the hubris to presume they can extinguish the sacred power without seeking God's grace. But we, brothers and sisters, we know better, and that is why we are gathered, to seek out the grace of God. Now, I see some of you crying in the pews. I see some of you struggling against your bonds, or squirming as Brother Holloway and Sister Sylvia approach you with the baptismal kerosene. But fear not, brothers and sisters, our journey is only beginning. Oh, I have such sights to show you. Our shared faith has brought us to this moment, to the celebration of the light, and to the precipice of the sacred inferno. Let the devils have this night. Let them have the whole damn world, in fact. We, brothers and sisters, our congregation that has been so misunderstood and so maligned by the unfaithful and uninitiated, we shall soon be one with eternity. Clad in the armor of faith, we shall embrace the cleansing fire and step through that burning gauntlet, purified and worthy to sit at the table of the Lord.
Bravo.
I love the animation.
That was fantastic.
I was totally picturing like a dark, smoky bar at, open mic night for people to read their poetry. Like I totally got it.
Nice. And that story is exactly 666 words.
Nice. Did you plan that specifically?
No,
Or
I
did
got
you
it
turn
till
out that way?
You took out a few tha's that.
Yeah, I was like, this is 668 words. I can't make this
I could take out two.
Exactly.
So, and do I have time for the poem?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
All right, so I was going to do a poem as well. This is in the Horror Writers Association Poetry Showcase Volume 6. And this is one of the, I don't know, this might be the first or second poem I ever sold. And it's called White Night and Black Stars. She sang beneath the white noise of an old UHF band. She beckoned from the static of a broken Magnavox, a tonal yet alluring, her song a siren's demand. Her monochrome beauty spoke of far exotic land, or long forgotten races living in oceans or locks. She sang beneath the white noise of an old UHF band. Sweet discordant notes, and nothing's formed my lady's command, to lay my lips upon the screen, to bow before that box, a tonal yet alluring, her song a siren's demand. Her electric caress coursed through each finger and each hand. Her ultra lips and copper kiss gave playful static shocks. She sang beneath the white noise of an old UHF band. She urged my face through liquid glass into that shifting sand of black and white cathode ray light, our worlds in equinox. A tonal yet alluring, her song a siren's demand. One last kiss and she vanished into white night and black stars. The glass reformed, leaving my soul and face within that box. A tonal yet alluring, her song a siren's demand. She sang beneath the white noise of an old UHF band.
Nice.
So do you write a lot of poetry?
I was writing a lot of poetry for a little while. For a little bit, I was doing 2 poems a month on Patreon, and that I wasn't able to keep it up with my workload and stuff recently. But I enjoy writing it. It's a different kind of challenge, and I used to write lyrics when I played in band, so I enjoy it. My next collection is going to thank you, Priscilla. My next collection should have a few poems in it, assuming that the publisher doesn't hate them. And and I'd like to do an illustrated poetry book at some point. That's on my bucket list.
Do you make everything rhyme?
It depends. No, I don't.
It was a joke because
No.
I read a lot of poetry that doesn't rhyme. It was just a joke. So.
So it's interesting. Poetry, there's a lot of free verse poetry and stuff like that now, and I can't really write that sort of stuff because I feel like I'm not good enough at it. So I need to use like established modes of poetry, like a villanelle or a sonnet or whatever, because I like a roadmap. But I like experimenting with it. I like the limitations of working with an established form,
Right.
Because it kind of makes me get more creative with the language sometimes when I have to fit a certain amount of syllables or a certain rhyme scheme.
So Minnie's got a question here.
Yeah.
About Devil's Night, the ebook. Does that include the artwork, or is that just
The
hardcover?
ebook does have the artwork.
Nice. That's nice for an ebook to have the artwork.
Yeah. I actually formatted the ebook myself for Weird House. So the artwork's all in there. The artwork will be in the paperback when it comes out, but the paperback artwork will be black and white.
Okay. And I guess the ebook, it's in color still.
The ebook is in color still, yes.
If you
it
have
looks great on a screen.
Yeah. Is the paperback also through Weird House as well?
Yes, it's all through Weird House.
Nice.
Yep.
So tell people about this real quick. So this is all taking place on Halloween, not necessarily the same Halloween, I don't think, right? Or
it takes place on the night before Halloween. It's all October 30th, 1987.
Okay.
So
it's all in Detroit, right? If I'm not mistaken.
In Detroit, yeah. So anybody who doesn't know, back in the day, not so much anymore, the night before Halloween was called Devil's Night in Detroit, and people would set the whole damn city on fire and smash storefronts and steal, and it was a real kind of nightmare to live through. And some of it was people just exploiting, for profit, or trying to vent, but also there were things where the police couldn't quite do their jobs, whether they weren't, I don't know if they weren't competent enough or if they weren't funded enough, but there was a huge drug problem and such. So a lot of, working class people in Detroit would go out and they'd like burn down drug dens and gang dens and such. So some of those
vigilante justice kind of.
Yeah. So a lot of those fires were like vigilante things. And then a lot of it was just kids or, insurance jobs or whatever. So, this is all documented kind of in the movie The Crow, which is where I found out about it when I was younger. And I didn't even realize it was a real thing until years later. So I was always fascinated by it once I found out it was real. And Joe at Weird House, he read Blackheart Boys Choir, and he's like, "This is fantastic, and I absolutely can't sell it." So he's like, "Why don't you write me a short story collection?" And I said, "Okay." And he said, "How do you feel about doing a Halloween collection?" I said, "How about I do a Devil's Night collection? Because that sounds, that hasn't really been done." And he said, "Yeah, it sounds fantastic." And I pitched it as kind of being similar to like Sin City, where all the stories would be kind of interconnected in loose ways. So that's what it is. It's a group of loosely connected stories with some recurring characters and some events that overlap that all take place on the same Devil's Night. And it really explores the issues, the social issues of Detroit at that time, but through kind of a supernatural lens for the most part. And it was very cool to write, because like I said, I find Devil's Night fascinating. I find Halloween imagery really fun to write. And the history of Detroit going into it, all the research I did was really fascinating and kind of heartbreaking. It was a really tough place to live back then. And I wanted to be as honest as I could about that without
exploiting it, kind of.
Yeah, without exploiting it, and without doing anything that would be, I guess, crass or offensive for the sake of being offensive. So there was a lot of racism in Detroit on every, it wasn't just like, white cops and black citizens or whatever. It was, like a lot of the black community hated the Arab community, because after white flight happened, all these, in the 60s, all the white people fled from Detroit proper into the suburbs. So all the people in these black neighborhoods, they're like, well, we could buy up the businesses and everything, but they didn't have the credit, they didn't have the money. So a lot of Arab immigrants moved in and they bought up the businesses and such. So there was a lot of resentment from the black community against the Arab community. And then there was, black versus white racism and all this other stuff. So it was a bunch of little tribes, almost. And I wanted to touch upon that and kind of the tragedy of that, and living in this really divided, violent city that is dealing with drugs and crime and poverty, and the failing auto industry was a huge part of it. so there's no jobs to go around. And I wanted to address those as honestly as I could through the lens
That's a
of
hard
weird
thing
fiction.
to do, especially that subject matter. There's a fine line that you have to do it with the proper taste.
Exactly.
It can really come off totally bad if you just mess up one thing. So
exactly. And for the most part, I think it went over well. I think people believe that I handled it well, which I hope I did. I got one review where the person was uncomfortable. It was a younger person. They were uncomfortable that that it talked about racism and that it had, tackled racism at all. Like, I know this takes place in the 80s, but it's the 21st century.
Yeah.
And I could see that with younger people getting, who didn't live around this thing when they were younger, getting really uncomfortable, even talking about it. But it was real and it happened, and I think it's important to explore.
Right.
Yeah. There's like an authenticity as well. Like, you can't just ignore it and say it never happened.
Exactly.
Pay homage is not the right word, but do it in a graceful way where, like you were trying to do, where it doesn't offend somebody, or you're trying not to offend people, but it's a thing that happens. So, people
and that's when you can see
learn
like
from it as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's when you can see like the writers really done their research, how deep they go with it, that it just didn't throw stories that you heard, 5 minutes of on the news, where they actually did their research, look farther into it to put everything together to make sense. So
yeah, absolutely. I've read a bunch of books on there. There's actually another book that I think might be called Devil's Night. That's like a nonfiction book that I read, which got into. There's a story in there called Devil's Tongue, which is about like an Arab store owner and this kind of teenage black gang member, and a lot of that was inspired by like real stories I read in that book. And also the mythology, though, Detroit has such a rich mythology, which was another great thing to be able to draw on. It was really rewarding. Like there's the Nain Rouge, which is this kind of like demonic figure that pops up in the stories. And one of the things I love about like urban legends is they're so unreliable. It's always different depending on who's saying it. So depending on which story you read about the Nain Rouge, it's either like a bad omen, or it could be like a beneficial figure that shows up to help in some way, or it's a straight up demon. And I was able to write stories where the Nain Rouge takes on these different elements, and kind of, you never know exactly what it is, which I thought kind of embraced the whole urban legend thing. And then
so it's these different aspects of the same
exactly. And I really enjoy doing stuff like that. And then there's this urban legend about like this hobo pig lady, which I incorporated. And there's just a bunch of really cool urban legends and folklore and ghost stories that I was able to draw on, and it was fantastic to put it together and to try to do my best to treat it with respect and write some cool stories.
You talk about all the folklore and urban legends, that totally gave me Candyman vibes. You were talking about that.
Yeah, well, Candyman was one of the stories I went back to when I was working on this, because I was thinking about some of the similarities with Candyman and the urban legend thing. Did you read the Clive Barker story? I read the Clive Barker story, yeah. But I think for this, the film was more in line with what I was doing.
You didn't kill a dog, though, did you?
No, I don't think I kill any dogs in there. I try not to. Yeah, I know people get real sensitive about that.
Yeah. Well,
I don't care.
All the people you want to.
People you want, yes. My wife makes me watch it to let her know when it's over. When you know it's coming, she's doing this, but she's like, "Is it over?" I'm like, "Why do I have to watch it? I don't know."
Yeah, I don't think I've ever killed a dog in any of my stuff. So.
But just wait, Jay. Just wait. He's gonna do it for you.
I know, really. Just for you, Jay.
One last thing for this book. You have a story in here called D20, and I'm a big Dungeons and Dragons nerd. So you also play Dungeons and Dragons?
I've been playing D&D since I was about 10 years old.
Nice.
And I played nonstop until like my mid 30s, and then life got a little bit hectic, and because I can't. My wife and I met playing D&D. Let me show you something. I'll be right.
Okay. Did he have pants on, Jay? I couldn't tell. Could you tell?
I don't. It's shorts.
this is the bouquet from my wife's bouquet from our wedding, and the petals are made out of the pages of a second edition Dungeon Master's
Oh,
Guide.
that's cool. That's
Is
extreme
that,
nerd
is that
right
cool
there.
though? I
That's
was gonna say,
That
is that
is
really
cool.
cool? I don't know.
definitely cool.
I think the verdict's out on that. Is it cool or not?
That's cool.
So we didn't meet playing D&D, but like that's how our relationship kind of started, was over the course of a D&D game. And yeah, it's been a huge part of my life for a long time. And not just D&D, but like tabletop role-playing games in general. So I was really thrilled with the illustration for that story too. Luke did a great job with that. And that was a fun story to write.
Yeah, I don't know how well it'll show up, but
Yeah.
What kind of input do you have for the illustrations? Did you have the ideas of someone else put together? Or?
Oh yeah, Joe at Weird House said, just tell Luke what you want him to draw. Like, I have a budget for this many illustrations.
Yeah.
So I sent Luke kind of like maybe like a couple sentences on each thing, and he just went to town.
Do you do artwork yourself too? Or
no, I'm awful. I can do like kind of digital layout stuff, but I can't draw. So
and Luke did the cover for Boy's Heart as well.
He did this
is my favorite cover of any book I read, I guess, last year.
Yeah, I saw that. Thank you for that awesome video.
Yeah, I like the colors in it and everything. Just the whole aesthetic of it's great.
That's kind of why I chose Luke for that, because he was doing these really like nice like oh, thank you. Yes, I did find love through D&D. And a lot of Luke's stuff had these like purples and blues and like almost like hot pinks, and it was so eye-catching that I actually I bought that cover from him before I even decided to self-publish or whatever. I was still shopping it around. I was shopping it around with the cover. So
that's a great cover.
Yeah, but Luke's fantastic too. I sent Luke the idea for the Blackheart Boys Choir cover, and he had it back to me in less than 12 hours.
Oh,
I think you messaged me that, like, it was like almost instant turnaround.
Yeah,
that just blows my mind.
In the Devil's Night illustrations, he got those done super fast. He's such a professional. He puts out such great work, and he does it fast. I can't say enough great things about working with him.
So talk about kind of art on transition. So you also write comic books as well, right?
Comics and graphic novels, right?
Yeah.
So I did comics for about 10 years before I started writing prose. It's a very limited success. And the reason I wrote my first novel was because I didn't have any more money to pay artists that I wasn't going to make back. I was sitting there, we were saving up for our own home, and I was like, I can't keep shelling out thousands of dollars for artwork that's going to sit on my computer that no one's ever going to see. Because one of the things when you're doing comics, when you're pitching comics to a company, you have to have a lot of times like 5 to 10 pages finished, art and everything that you send to the publisher, and then they reject. So I had all these like started projects, like 5 pages of this, 3 pages of this, 10 pages of that, and I didn't have the money to keep paying the artist to do the full thing. So I'd start a new project and try to get that published, and that didn't get published. And I did self-publish a few things. I had a press called Broken Soul Press for a while, and I did some one-shots, nothing huge through there. I did one graphic novel that I scripted for Q Publishing called Diabolicus, which I didn't actually write it per se. I scripted it. I worked off an outline that the owner gave me for a story that he came up with. And that's Diabolicus, which is one of my earliest pieces. And the only big thing that I ever put out, like as far as like big in size, was a graphic novel called Mystima, which I wrote, was published from Arcana Comics. And the artist on that, Nico Leone, I gave him his first job in comics, and he has an exclusive contract with Marvel now, and he's drawn Spider-Man, he's drawn
that's awesome.
Yeah, She-Hulk, Captain Marvel, all this stuff. And a couple
Does he ever
years
mention you when he's getting awards or anything?
Yeah.
So he hasn't, but he drew me and my family into an issue of Spider-Man.
Really?
So
awesome.
there's an issue of Spider-Man where we're in the background.
That's pretty sweet.
And he's from Argentina, but he moved to Japan, and he was at New York Comic Con a few years ago, and he had tickets to this red carpet Stan Lee memorial thing. And he's like, hey, why don't you come to New York and go to the Stan Lee memorial with me? So I got to go with him, and it was all, it was filled with, writers and artists, but also it had like all the Netflix actors and like the guy who played, the head guy on Agents of Shield there, and
Coulson had Coulson.
Yeah, Coulson. Yeah, and what's his name? Tom Hiddleston was there. It was very cool.
That's cool.
And we got to take red carpet pictures and stuff. It was very kind of him to take me there. I said, man, like you're like in the United States at this comic convention and you're like a professional artist and you're young. Why don't you like take some girl from the convention? And he's like, no, thank you.
You guys nerd out with Dungeons and Dragons. I would nerd out with that. I would nerd out with the Marvel stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. So Mistimo was the only thing I did that had like diamond distribution that was like kind of significant in length. But I did do a comic called The Wrong House that I self-published, which was optioned for film and never actually got made into a film, but it was optioned. So that was cool. Mm-hmm. I made more money off of that than any of the other comic stuff I ever did.
So are any of your comics still available to find anywhere? Or are they all?
Yeah. Mistima is up on Comixology, and then like the Broken Soul Press stuff is on Drive-Thru Comics. I think you can still get the Broken Soul Press stuff. And then I have a couple web comics that are out there. There's something called Curse of the Black Terror, which was like a reimagining of a public domain character from like the Golden Age. And I finished one story arc of that and then abandoned it during the second story arc. So there's the unfinished that. There's an unfinished sci-fi comic called Divus Morte. A lot of beautiful art, but I just never had the money to finish them. So it's an expensive thing.
So you write comic books and you poetry and just prose. Do you have a favorite out of those? Or one that's easier than the other one?
I think I'm the best at prose. I think that's what I've learned. I have a real deep love of comics going back. Like it's one of my first loves. And I love seeing an artist bring my ideas to life. Yeah. And I get real nerdy about the physics of comics, so to speak, the time between the gutters and like, the way the panels work and the visual type stuff in it. I really love the craft of it. But prose is more rewarding to me, I think, in general. And maybe it's just because I've been more successful with it. Maybe that's colored my view on things.
Do you have any other writers in your family?
No, I don't think so.
So you're the one that nobody sits with at the family functions because of the stuff you write.
My family here in Massachusetts is basically my mom, like aside from my wife, but yeah, if I had more family, they probably wouldn't sit with me.
yeah. That's the guy that writes the scary stuff, guys.
No, usually, if I am at something with like my wife's extended family or something, people might ask about it. But I think it's more of a polite thing usually.
Well, then did you have the ones that are like, well, I got a good idea for a story.
Oh man, that's
it becomes
not with my family.
Space erotica.
That happens at work. That happens when I meet like random people. It happens, I'll reconnect with somebody like from my past on Facebook. They'll be like, "Oh, you're writing books. You should write this book." It's like,
I'll talk to you when we get off the air.
Yeah.
Mitch Seaborn, we had him on. He kind of talked about the same thing. Like he doesn't like when people like, "Hey, you should write this idea." It's like, well, if you want to do that, you should write it yourself.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, and I'm not like offended by it, but like.
Yeah,
every writer has a million ideas. None of us are like scraping for ideas. We're scraping for time, and and maybe we're trying to figure out how to best express those ideas. But we're not. We all have notebooks full of like stories we want to tell. But if you like have a really cool idea, just do it. Like you don't need anybody's permission. You don't even have to make it good. You can just write it. Like and I come from a real DIY background. I was putting out like shitty metal demos in like 1994. And I was putting out indie comics by myself, and I started off self-publishing books.
So that's second nature to you, doing the indie books.
Yeah.
And all that's second nature to you now.
So if you have an idea for a story or a song or anything, just do it, man. You don't need anybody's permission. Just, it comes down to having the discipline to put it down on paper.
Yeah, especially with Kindle Direct Publishing, anybody can get published and put it out there for people to read and stuff.
Yeah, and like I said, it doesn't have to be good. If it should be good if you want to have a career, but like if you just want to do it, Doesn't have to be.
Do
So
you write
there's no
something every day?
excuse as far as that.
Do I write every day?
Yeah, is there something
No,
like-
so like I said, when I was working less, I was working Monday through Friday. I had set times. I'd write from 9 to 11 and 1 to 2 every day, and that was a good groove that I was in. Now I just write when I can find the time. So it's usually when people are like, I try to write before people are awake or after they've gone to sleep, but that's pretty much no time now. Like my son wakes up early, my wife is up late, but yeah, I just squeeze it in wherever I can, whether it's, on a lunch break or when somebody's watching a TV show I'm not interested in or whatnot. And then sometimes I'll say, okay, guys, I need 2 hours. And I just take 2 hours. And my family respects my time in that sort of way. So as long as the house isn't falling apart and nothing's on fire,
Right.
I can usually find like at least an hour a day or so. But when I wrote The Devoured and It's a Bad World, I was working like 60 hours a week, and I wrote those books on train rides and lunch breaks. So if you want to do it, you find the time.
Yeah.
So you don't have like a certain word count you try to hit every day. You just do what you can.
Just do time. Yeah, I do what I can do, and I'm kind of a slow writer, and I can't. I'm too nitpicky to just write and be like, oh, I'll just fix it later. Like I get hung up on the phrasing of every other sentence. I get hung up on names and street names, and I'll get bogged down in all these details. I've gotten a little bit better with it, with like, names or streets or something like that, or even if I have to do a little research, I'll put little notes in there, tags to go back to. But if I notice that I started 3 paragraphs with the same word, like I can't just let it sit till the next
I do
draft.
that like in my reviews. Like I can't have the same word like in the same sentence. Like if they're that close on the page, it bothers me. I don't know why. It's weird.
So are you editing as you go along, or are you going and going back and doing it?
I do light edits as I go along. So if I notice something glaring there, I'll go and fix it. And then, but as a result of that, my first drafts are pretty clean, which makes editing easier. So,
yeah. Do you remember if there was like a book when you were younger that you read? It might have been a Lovecraft book, possibly, that you're like, you know what, I could do this. I'm going to do this. Was there one that just changed everything for you?
Not so much with books, like comics. Early on, I was like, I want to do this, and then that was before I started playing guitar, and then that kind of shifted. But I was like, this is what I want to do. I want to write about superheroes, and I want to write about like monsters, and like Ghost Rider was huge for me. So, and I felt like that was something I could do, and then I think with prose, it wasn't so much I think I can do this, but it made me want to. Whereas Chuck Palahniuk was a huge inspiration for me to start writing. Okay. The way he told stories really spoke to me.
Brad's not a fan, by the way.
No,
shut up. That's all right. I'm listening to Choke, and it's my first Palahniuk, and I'm kind of bored with it.
Okay.
But I'm sticking out because everybody says the ending is just mind blowing. So I'm
I
waiting
liked
for
Choke,
the ending.
but it wasn't my first. I liked Choke though. But
I haven't read much, but
I've heard Haunted is really good at Survival. People keep recommending me to try those.
Yeah. So his voice really stuck out to me, but also the other big ones early on were Vonnegut and obviously Lovecraft and what can I think right now? Douglas Adams, actually. Like the first short story that I ever like tried to write in earnest, like really was like, I'm going to write a good short story. It sounded like a mashup of like Chuck Palahniuk and Douglas Adams. It was the weirdest thing, and it was,
and that's
bad.
Where the weird writing came from. There you go.
Yeah. But I will credit this. So I actually submitted that. Like, I submitted the first short story that I ever like seriously tried to write, and the editor got back to me with a personalized rejection letter. And the fact that she took the time to do that and tell me like what worked and what didn't, I think that went a long way in me sticking with it instead of just the blanket rejection. And I know that most editors don't have the time to do that, but when they can, I think it really makes a difference.
That was a good rejection then.
Oh, it was a fantastic rejection. It was like, oh, you have a great use of language, and this. She's basically like, you're not telling a story though. She's like, this is like a monologue. Like, you really painted the scene well. You have great dialogue, but there's no story. And it was a
How-
very valid criticism.
About how old were you when you submitted that? Do you remember?
Oh, I was in my 20s at that point. So it was right before I started doing comics. I was kind of trying to do comics, and I was trying to Zarathos. I was trying to do comics, and I was trying to write some short stories. Basically, I had been in the band, and it broke up, and I decided I didn't want to do stuff with other people anymore. I wanted to do something where
Solo stuff.
Yeah, I wanted to do something that was going to succeed or fail based on my merit. I figured writing was a good way to do that, and also being in the band's like being in a dysfunctional relationship with like 3 people, and I was kind of tired of that. So I wanted to do something that was not so social in that regard.
Yeah.
Writing's very antisocial.
Yeah, it was very solitary.
It kind of is, yeah.
So
Yeah.
So I was still trying to figure out what I wanted to do. But yeah, I was probably 25 when I submitted that, and like I said, I didn't know I wasn't telling a story, and that's why I started plotting, because I realized that when I just sit down and write, I don't tell stories. I just ramble. Like
That sounds like you, Jay. You just like to ramble.
A little bit, just a tad. Yeah. So as we start winding down, I know you have a few left, Brad. Do you?
I just want to say, in regards to comics, though, comics did help me a lot with how to tell a story, because especially with bands do suck. It's fun too, though. I miss playing live shows. So
I miss live music.
Yeah. When you're writing comics, economy of storytelling is huge, because a lot of times you have 25 pages to tell a story. Because that's what they're going to give you, and you can only fit so many panels per page. You can only fit so many words per page. So it forced me to plot things out in a way where I could budget this many pages to a scene, and I could budget this much dialogue, and it made me learn how to tell a story without relying on dialogue, with visual things, and with showing instead of telling. So a lot of that stuff translated into writing prose, and anybody who hasn't done it, I highly recommend trying to do some screenwriting or comic script writing, because it's going to make you a much more versatile writer.
That's good advice. Yeah.
So like with comic books, is there like a certain word count like you can't go over, or does it not really matter?
It's not word count so much as there's like a certain amount of dialogue that you can't go over in like a panel, because it just crowds out everything. And depending on the type of story, you want to stick to kind of a grid, like maybe it's a 6-page grid, or whatever, 6-panel grid, whatever you kind of decide on. And then you can stray from that, but you want to use that as kind of a starting point. And some people break these rules. Brian Michael Bendis is well known for throwing word bubbles everywhere, and he's one of my favorite comic writers. And then you have something like Watchmen, though, which I think is like a 12-panel grid, which is ridiculous, and it worked really well. But it's very rigid to that grid structure. But yeah, there's different considerations with it, and I think it really teaches economy of storytelling. So
yeah, because I'm basically a newbie when it comes to comic books. I never really got into them as a kid and whatnot, so I don't really know.
I was really into them when I was younger, and I wish I still had them. I really wish I was. That's why I would nerd out for the Marvel stuff. I've been trying to get in graphic novels. I've had Watchmen for like 12 years, 13 years. I just haven't read it yet.
All right.
What's the difference between a comic and a graphic novel? Like, what's the distinction between the two?
Marketing.
Okay. If it was like page count.
I thought it was linked. I thought it was page count.
So it's page count, but like they'll take like collections of like a monthly issue. They might take 6 issues of Spider-Man and
because they do like The Walking Dead, they put them all together. And is
and
then a graphic novel at that point, or
technically a trade paperback, but like they call it a graphic novel. And there was I forget what the name of the movie was. There was some crime movie with Tom Hanks that was based on a graphic novel, and in an interview, the guy who wrote it, they asked him.
It's not Road to Perdition, is it?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
And they asked the writer, what's a graphic novel? And he said it's a big fat comic book. And like
that's basically what it is. Yeah.
The movie studio got bullshit because like comic books are for kids. So it really comes down to it's a way to try to sell comics to adults.
Because they look, as far as I can tell, they're the same. Just one seems longer than the other one.
Yeah, that's
what
the
I
only
got
difference.
out of it.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's it.
comic books are not for kids. Not, I mean, there are
Not
some
anymore.
just for
No,
kids, but I
There's
mean,
definitely some that are not
know,
for kids.
I'm not giving V for Vendetta to my kids to read. You know what I mean?
James Fetcho, I have like 10 long boxes behind this bookshelf. I've got all mine too.
Well, I've got like all my Goosebumps books from when I was a kid. I have them over here in a old Kroger box still.
Nice.
So.
Yeah.
And Nikki
I
says we
remember
need a comic of Blackheart. That would be
So
cool.
this is something I've been trying to work on. Once again, it comes down to money, but I actually did talk to some artists, and it's something I want to do as a comic book of Blackheart Boys Choir. I started writing a script for it. I'd really like to do it maybe through Kickstarter at some point, but
That'd be sweet.
Yeah, but it's
I don't remember
it's a
the
project.
names. I know it was Sarah Tainlinger, and I can't remember the other guy's name. They did a graphic novel about H.H. Holmes, I think, recently. They did it on Kickstarter.
Yep.
I think it might be called Devil something. I can't remember.
Yeah,
for sure.
Devil City or something. It was
something like that. But it was also like a tabletop game too.
Yeah, it was a tabletop. I actually had them on Weird Transmission. Well, I had
that's
the
cool.
guy who owns the company on Weird Transmissions to talk about it. So
that's pretty sweet.
Yeah.
So would you if you did turn it into a comic, I guess you would adapt it and take stuff out or would you try to do the whole thing as
I mean, I would have to sit down and see what works. I mean, there's different considerations. Obviously, I can't fit all of Lucian's kind of inner dialogue into a comic format.
That would be some pretty cool art, though.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think it'd make a very cool visual story. And yeah, I'd love to see it. And I have a couple ideas for artists who I'd really like to see do it. But yeah, it would. It's something I want to do. It's very much on my bucket list. In 2000 AD, I got rejected by them so many times.
But me and Jay were talking before. I think you came in about without giving too much away. There's a scene in here where it's almost he goes back to a house that's almost kind of cartoony. That would be awesome to see it in graphic novel form.
You know, that scene came to me like just on the spur. I just came up with it as I was writing.
Not even
it.
Cartoony, like maybe Sin City-ish is more the kind of theme of it.
I was thinking of like you ever see like Mystery Theater?
Yeah.
I was thinking like the intro to Mystery Theater kind of thing. Like that's what I had in my head. And I almost took that scene out because I was like, oh man, this might be too silly or whatever. But
no, I think it worked good.
Thank you.
Because he was in that mindset where you don't know if what he's doing is real, if it's all in his head, and that worked. That played right into that.
Acid trip.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's definitely some Paper Cuts comic book guys, huh?
There you go. You can write it for us, Curtis.
I would love to see it in some sort of visual format.
It'll be the rise and fall of
the rise and fall of the
It'd be one issue and that's it.
I also put it up. There's this marketplace that you can get your stuff up on for like production companies to look at. And I put Boys Choir up on there, and it was like a top pick for the company or whatever. And they actively kind of try to pitch it to movie people. So, maybe someday that would be cool.
If it ever were adapted to screen, would you rather have it be a movie or like a limited series or something?
I'm not too picky. I'm a big believer in letting experts do what experts do. That's when I did comics, I used the artist's discretion on a lot of things because they know how to make visual shit work. A filmmaker is going to know how to make something work better than I do. So, I'd leave it up to their discretion. But yeah.
Yeah, Andres, there's books that come on chapters and prose and then chapters on X Comics. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that is.
And James he's got to buy a book. He's got to buy. Yeah, he's got to buy it now.
I appreciate that.
It's an awesome book. It's fun.
That's been every show so far. We've had people.
I think we've sold at least one book every show.
Yeah.
Nice.
So that should be our tagline. Come on our show. We'll sell.
You'll sell a book.
We'll sell at least one book for you.
We promise one. Even if nobody else buys it, I'll have to buy it.
Background. We have to do
Boys Choir is, for the time being, like 99 cents on Kindle. So
is it really?
Yeah.
Definitely.
There's no reason not to buy it.
It's definitely worth more than 99 cents.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. I think I do this. I buy like 4 or 5 from an author at once on the Kindle and then get to them later, way later. And I knew we were having it on the show, so I binged Blackheart Boys Acquired this week. So
the show has been a good excuse for me for books that I've had to actually get to them.
Nice.
It's like we were talking about earlier. There's so many books to read. oh, this person's coming on. I should read something
Yeah.
so we can
Yes,
talk about
that's it.
something.
I do the
what's
same
coming up.
thing.
Yeah, that's what's coming up. So, what are you reading
also-
now? Anything special?
Yeah.
What was that? What am I reading?
What are you reading now?
I'm listening to the audiobook for Let the Right One In.
Okay.
I
I had that
I'm almost done
around
with.
somewhere. Yeah.
Does
So
it
I'm
go by
re-
2 different names? Is it Let Me In and then there's
It's
Let the Right
yeah.
One
So
In?
Let Me In is the like American movie, and like the audiobook I actually have. The version of the audiobook I have is called Let Me In, but I think they just changed it because the
Yeah.
movie was called Let Me In.
Because I've got it over there, I think.
Yeah.
I think it's just called Let Me In over there.
Yeah, so same thing though. But yeah, I'm listening to the audiobook of that and beta reading some stories for Joshua Rex, who's a fantastic author and a good friend of mine.
I've got his collection I need to get to.
Yeah.
What's it called? What's it called?
Um,
It's something with Graveyard, right?
it's got the Graveyard on there. A Mighty Word, I think.
Here, this is the one I have. What's Coming for You?
Oh, What's Coming for You? A Mighty Word is his novel, sorry.
Yeah.
What's Coming for You is the
Oh, another
collection.
one I need to get to.
Yes. So I beta read those stories too for Joshua, and yeah, he's a very cool guy and just a fantastic writer. I can't recommend his stuff enough. And so I'm beta reading some stuff for him, and yeah, I've been doing a lot of that. So I haven't gotten to like a lot of books because I've been either like beta reading for people or reading stuff like trying to catch up for somebody who's going to be on the podcast or something like that.
After you beta read them, do they come back to you, ask you for a blurb or anything? Or
Occasionally,
do you do blurbs and stuff?
yeah, I haven't gotten asked for a lot of blurbs, but a few. I just blurbed a book for Garrett Boatman, his new book Floaters, and I've had a few. Oh, Jason Parent used one of my blurbs on his book White Trash and Dirty Dingoes. He put my blurb on the cover of that.
That's a great title.
It's a great book. Jason Parent's a fantastic author too. I really enjoy his stuff.
So something completely separate from books, I wanted to ask, since you live in Salem, Massachusetts, for you all there is like the Salem witch trials, is that a big thing or is that more like that's the tourist stuff?
Well, I mean, it's the tourist stuff, but it's the industry that drives the city. It's kind of absurd. And so it depends on what you do for work in Salem, how you feel about it. So if you work downtown in the tourist area, if you work in the food industry, in one of the witchcraft shops or the museums, you love it. If you have to drive through Salem to get to work, so a lot of people in my neighborhood, like you'll see these bumper stickers that be like, "Why do they call it tourist season if you can't shoot them?" You know, stuff like that. And, it's tough. I only moved here maybe 6 years ago, and I love Halloween. I like spooky stuff. I even like the cheesy spooky stuff. I enjoy it, and I work in Salem. Like I can walk to work, so it doesn't bother me. I enjoy it, but if you're trying to get anywhere though, even it's from September through October 31st, it's a nightmare to go anywhere. The only
they
thing
do it
about
big for Halloween, don't they?
Oh, it's ridiculous, yeah. And I think this year is going to be gigantic because they couldn't really do last year. So the only thing about it is it can be, from a historical point of view, I think it's kind of tacky and kind of exploitive because I mean essentially it's I like spooky stuff and I like the fun like Salem happenings, but we're kind of celebrating women who were basically killed for their
no
property
reason.
It's like, oh, I want her property, she's a witch, and that was kind of done by design. So Salem's main industry used to be nautical, and it was a huge trading center. It's the fact that like the Far East, I think China thought Salem was its own country because so many ships went there. like that's a legit thing that I heard on a tour here. And we have a huge maritime history, but when all that started drying up and like all the business started dying here, somebody was like, didn't we do some awful shit to some old ladies like 100 years ago? And they're like, yeah, like let's make a map of that. Like, let's try to bring in some tourists. And they created this whole like witch industry, and a lot of it didn't happen here. Like most of it didn't happen here. So Old Salem Village was also Danvers, which is the next city over, and most of it happened in Danvers. but Danvers doesn't want any part of it. So they're like, yeah, you guys can have that.
Yeah, it's like they're celebrating like a fake celebration almost because of the bad stuff.
There's one house in Salem that's tied to the witch trials. A single house. It's called the Witch House, and it's this cool black house. And there's the spot where they actually hung the witches, which is like behind a Walgreens. And like,
I was going to ask if there's like still like historical sites, or is it all just like tourist shops?
Well, there's like one of the oldest graveyards in the United States. There's the Witch House itself. The House of Seven Gables with Nathaniel Hawthorne. That's here.
It's like aisle 7 and Walgreens is where 2 witches were hung.
Yeah.
It's like,
it's actually funny. They only like some historian figured it out a few years back. I guess it wasn't like really known, and they figured it out. And there's a monument there, but it's like literally like you're like practically at Walgreens. It's like 10 feet away, and yeah, but there is a lot of historical stuff here. And there's a world-class art museum, which is kind of cool. And there's other historical aspects here too. Like Lovecraft would go to this cemetery here, and he took a lot of names from like graves and stuff there. There's a tree that used to be there that's referenced in a story. And then actually S.T. Joshi came here to do a Lovecraft's documentary with the Canadian Broadcast Company. And I tagged along for some of that. And we went to some places in Salem, but we also went to Danvers, where Danvers State Mental Institution is where Session 9 was filmed. I don't know if you guys ever saw that movie.
I've heard of it.
Yeah.
So it's also where the full frontal lobotomy was perfected. It's one of these like real horror story places. And it was the inspiration for Arkham Asylum. And
okay. Yep.
It's
Jay
also
knows that one.
Well, not just the Batman, but like the Lovecraftian Arkham Asylum that the Batman stuff was based off of. So that was built on Hathorne Hill, which was owned by John Hathorne, who was like one of the judges on the witch trials and stuff. So there's a lot of spooky history to that place, and now it's condos. But
that's so sad.
It is like they have part of the facade still there.
Spooky condos, get it right.
They are spooky condos because one of the terms and conditions of building condos there was they couldn't get rid of the unmarked graves.
Oh, that's creepy.
So there are unmarked graves there. They couldn't disturb them.
They charge extra for those condos.
They probably charge. Maybe they charge less.
They're pretty expensive. But yeah, it's so yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff around here. I really enjoy it. I like the atmosphere. I like the history. And I don't get too bent out of shape about the tourist. It's making people money, and people are having fun with it. And we have an outdoor market every year where people can set up tables and sell things like books, and that's nice.
They have like this almost personal fascination because there was John Proctor who was hung, and then they were going to hang his wife Elizabeth Proctor, but she was pregnant, so they didn't do it. And then by the time she wasn't pregnant, they let him go or whatnot. So I want to know if I'm actually related to that John Proctor. I think that'd be really cool.
I need to
do like the Ancestry.com.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think you get like a free trial for like a month.
Because I've looked it up, and him and Elizabeth, he had like 14, 17 kids, and at least half of them were boys. So there could be a possibility where I could be related to someone hung in the witch trials, which would just be really cool. Just an anecdote to talk about at a party or something.
Yeah, Ancestry.com is a lot of work, though. It's not just like you press a button.
Yeah. Is that the one with the leaf? I know there's
like
different ones. That's the leaf one, right? I think the leaves pop up telling you stuff.
Yeah, it became. My wife did it for like a month, and it just became so much work. And then people started asking her, "Hey, we're look up this person," and she's like, "No, I'm tired."
Yeah, it's
like I don't know anything past like my grandparents, so I don't know where we come from or anything like that.
I realized too that like there's so much. Like I know at least in my family and my wife's family, 2 instances where people are, basically were said to be of someone's child, but they weren't really that person's child, like that sort of stuff. And I imagine that's all over the place. Yeah. So who knows how
be afraid of what you're going to uncover on there,
Yeah.
Because Proctor's not a very common last name. So it's like, maybe there's a chance.
Lost my soda. Yeah, absolutely. It would be very cool. You could just tell people it's true.
Yeah. hey, I'm related.
Make up a story. Who's going to know?
Because one of my booktube friends, Jay Pruitt, he went to Salem, I guess last year, towards the end of 2020, and he took a picture of John Proctor's grave and sent it to me. So it was pretty cool.
Nice. Yeah, the graveyards are pretty cool here. So
yeah, and you got to I don't remember when it was. You shared a picture. You got to visit Lovecraft's grave, right? Or at least his memorial site.
That was actually me and Joshua Rex. So, I've lived in like around Boston my whole life, pretty much, aside from a year here or there, and I'd never gone there. And Providence is only like an hour away. So I was friends with Joshua Rex, and he was living in Providence. And he said, "Why don't I give you the tour? I'll give you the Lovecraft tour." So I said, "Yeah." And I drove down there, and he took me everywhere, and it was fantastic. Because it's such a small area, but like I got to see several places he lived, and there's this place where he took a picture because he was a big fan of Poe, where it was like a Poe historical site where Poe had gotten like a big screaming fight with his girlfriend at the time, like at this house, and so there's all this cool horror history there, and it's a beautiful city, anyways. And then, it all culminated at Lovecraft's grave, which always has like little tokens on there. I think when we went there, somebody left like a little Toxic Avenger head and like all this just random
like
stuff.
A Cthulhu Beanie Baby. And
but it was cool. I have such respect for his stories, and they made such an impact on me that, being 6 feet away from his corpse was kind of surreal, And it was a pretty, for lack of a better word, spiritual moment for me. And it was very cool to go there with Josh because he's we're on the same wavelength about a lot of things, and it was just cool to get to go there with him.
Cool.
That is pretty cool. I'd like to visit some. I've never been up. Well, I've been to New York City, but I've never been to like the Boston area and all that stuff. I'd like to visit sometime because I'm a big history buff, so I like all the, American history and all that kind of stuff. All that's very fascinating.
Oh yeah, it's there's so much of it to do here. Talking about the nerdy stuff with my wife, our first actual date was doing the Freedom Trail. So,
that'd be cool. See, that's the kind of stuff I'd like to do.
Yeah.
And like our town, I'm sure every town has the little plaques around like the historic downtown area saying this house was owned by such and such in 1795. I stop and read all those signs all the time. And
like you can go to Paul Revere's house, and there's the site where like Crispus Attucks was shot, and it's all very accessible.
Yeah, that's cool. James says,
well, this segment of History Chat has been brought to you by the Discovery Channel.
James,
Jay,
you should have your brother take you there.
Do you like history, Jay?
Yeah, but
because you have a lot of uncommon. We have things that we don't like. Like you don't like sci-fi. I like sci-fi, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I feel like you wouldn't like history because I like history.
Dude, I'm old, so
you have
I live some of this history that you're talking about. So. Yeah.
So where can everybody find you at, Curtis?
Start winding down here. I'm
pretty accessible. I'm on Twitter as @C_Lawson. I don't use that as much, but I'm trying to use it more. People can send me a friend request on Facebook, just Curtis M. Lawson. I also have an author page on there, but author pages on Facebook are kind of useless, so I don't use it all that much. I'm on Instagram as Curtis M. Lawson. I have a Patreon at patreon.com/Curtis M. Lawson. So basically anywhere Curtis M. Lawson, you can find me.
You can find him at.
And I'm very accessible if people want to hit me up or send me emails or whatever. Yeah, curtismlawson.com, and you can send me messages through there. I love to hear from people, so
And where can they find your podcast at?
So it's on Spotify, it's on Apple, it's on everything. So I just look on wherever you listen to podcasts for weird transmissions.
You just upload it to Anchor, and
I use Spreaker.
Okay.
So yeah, anywhere you listen to podcasts, and
it's Weird Transmissions, WYRD Transmissions.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. Spelled weird. So
you did.
Yeah.
Just to be weird.
Just to be weird.
That's a rabbit hole.
Don't do it, Jay. Don't go down the rabbit hole.
Curtis, we appreciate you so much for joining our shenanigans for the evening.
Oh, my pleasure. This was fantastic, guys.
Yeah. It was fun, man. I appreciate you coming on.
It was a blast.
Thank you.
Yeah. So for our guest, Curtis M. Lawson, make sure you pick up all of his
Go
books.
buy a book.
And
Keep Blackheart Boys
you go.
Choir. It was awesome.
thank you to
my-
everyone who has been watching and commenting.
Yeah. And for my partner in crime over there, Brad Proctor, this has been another exciting episode of Paper Cuts. Until we meet again, stay safe.
See you guys.